Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us. Welcome to the webinar, Making Market Assessment Fit for Your Purpose. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Abdullahi Hamidou. I'm the Capacity Building Lead for West and Central Africa. The aim of this webinar is for us and you to open again the discussion related to market assessment and to look at the need for agencies to have for market related data and analysis. But before diving into the webinar, let's have a quick call with you, 2 minutes poll to see. Okay, Pauline, can you launch the poll, please? Okay. Okay. 100 votes. Mm-hmm. More 20 seconds and end the poll. Okay, great. Pauline, can you share the result of the poll? Thank you. Great. So most of the participants are familiar with market assessment, a bit less with very familiar, but we have not a lot who are not familiar with market assessment in terms of guidance and tools. Yeah, we have more for EMA, RAM, and MSMR, and the other market and guidance. Okay, great. So can you end the poll now to close the poll, Helen, please? Okay, after this poll, let's see how our agenda will look like. We will have 4 sessions during this webinar. The first session, it will be an introduction by Kalp, and then we will have a general discussion on market assessment by market and crisis community. And the third session will be on the multi-sector market assessment tool by NLC and UNSCR. And we will finish with question answers, which we have not been able to cover during the previous sessions. Let's now present the other panelists of the webinar. From market and crisis community, you have Corey Sessions, CRS technical advisor for cash and market. And you have Kerry Bine, independent consultant. We will have with us to Lily Mohidin, NLC Regional Cash and Market Advisor, and Hannah Martinen from UNHCR will be with us to facilitate this webinar. Just to remind for those who are not familiar with online meeting, we have some ground rules to share with you. This webinar will last around 1 hour and 30 minutes. If you don't, your mic will remain off. And please, if you can adjust your name and your organization so that the other participant will see, and us as facilitator, we can see with whom we are during this webinar. And then we have two windows. If you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A chat. If you want the panelists respond to your question. But if you want to comment, you can use the comment chat box, and the webinar, as you have seen, will be recorded. So I will start for a quick introduction on market and market assessment. As we know, population relies on market to cover portion or all their basic needs, and humanitarian organizations progressively focus on understanding market to identify the most appropriate humanitarian response and modality. To do so, humanitarian response need to be informed by a proper market assessment and analysis, starting at the design stage. So when you finish all these step of assessment, evaluation for the step of your project cycle, you need to take the decision for the modality, and to inform this decision, you need to understand at this stage of design of your project, the market functionality, and so on. This is why CALP have developed the Misma, which is the minimum standard for market analysis. For CALP is to contribute to that end. And the Misma was first developed in 2013, and then updated in 2018. And it's now part of the Humanitarian Standard Partnership. The aim of the Misma is to guide the work of the humanitarian practitioners, actors, sectors, and to ensure that independently to the tool you will be using, the key standards of market assessment are being met. It's established on the same time the standards that must be beat in any market analysis exercise to ensure quality of humanitarian responses, to guide the work of humanitarian practitioners across sectors, and to contribute to design quality humanitarian responses. The Misma give you key action to take. The key action, the first one is The first one is to define the geographical scope of your work. And these key 5 actions to text are not like a linear process, but rather it can be an iterative process. The scope of the first key action will define the analytical and geographical scope of the assessment. And this is important to understand which market you are including. And the second point is the market team. So we need to have to build a competency and knowledge within the team who will be conducting data collection and analysis. The fourth key action is to conduct the market analysis adequately to inform your program design and achieve your objectives. And lastly, you have the 5 action is to monitor market. So it's not like just to assess market for design, but even during the project implementation, you need to monitor how your intervention is impacting the market. The Misma propose this framework for market analysis, but like the previous 5 key action, it is not intended to be a linear process, but it also an iterative process, and the other can see them differently. But here is this 5 sequence, which we think it will be good to cover when conducting a market analysis process. The first one is to identify the need of and the gap, to conduct the gap analysis for your target population. The market assessment to define the objective. And then the third one is to identify the critical market. And then to define the scope of your work as previously indicated in the first key action. And then you need to design some key analytical questions before selecting your market assessment tool or guidance you will be using throughout the process. And like I said, it's not a linear process. It is an iterative process, and some other can see it differently. So to finish, I will just let you know that CALP has, for capacity building, face-to-face training on market assessment tools. And we also have some online trainings and a dedicated market thematic page on the CALP website. I invite you to visit the Cash Learning Hub if not yet done, and our web page for more information on market assessment and market in general. And for the market assessment tools training, CALP is not endorsing any market assessment tool, but is just CALP is prioritizing some of the commonly used by the humanitarian organizations. This is to make participants be familiarized with the various tools that exist in order to help them to conduct the process of market assessment and to design the project. So I will leave it here and give the floor to Corey and Carrie to have a look more broadly beyond what I said, more broadly on market assessment in general. Thank you so much. Up to you. Corey and
Abdullahi, sorry, do you mind if I just jump in for a second here? Because I think what you're saying is really pertinent. So exactly as you're saying, CALP does not have a preferred tool or a favorite tool, so to speak, but is open-minded regarding all the tools available to the sector. But the role of the Misma and why the Misma was developed was to give people a sense of what needs to be collected, what should be considered, what methodology should be applied, and when a practitioner can tell when enough information has been collected. As many of you guys know, when you undertake any kind of assessment, including market assessment, knowing when to stop can be a challenge. And of course, the Misma is something that really helps us to do that. And the arrow that Abdullahi has showed us in terms of those steps, I mean, as he said, it's not linear, and most organizations will undertake those steps according to their own preference. But those are the steps which are, of course, recommended by CALP as being good practice. So I just wanted to say that, Abdullahi, thank you very much. And I'll just pass over to Corey and Carrie. I just wanted to get that out there. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Lily, for your contribution. Over to you, Corey and Carrie.
Thank you, Abdullahi, and thank you, Lily. That's a very good grounding point. So hi, welcome everybody. My name is Corey and I'm here with Carrie. It's the Corey and Carrie show.
Confusing.
Yes. We are from the Markets and Crisis Community of Practice, the MIC. Some of you might be aware of the MIC, or it might be something that is totally new. But the MIC Community of Practice basically provides a platform for actors engaging with markets, not only in humanitarian, but also in development contexts, to discuss ideas, experiences, share learning and resources. And it's been around for many years, but since 2017, roughly, has been facilitated by our friends at the SEEP network. And as of today, we're about 2,500 diverse members in the Markets of Crisis D group, which is fantastic, from a variety of countries across the world, from Africa, Asia, Middle East, to Europe and North America. And one of the main things that we do is we have this discussion group, and you can see the link on the chat. So many of you today might be involved in the MICD group, but if you're not, please join the discussion and get involved. But we also have a searchable resource library, webinars, networking events, and various kind of facilitated live discussion forums that we organize. One of the things that we have recently done, you can see two things on the slide there, we produced a statement last year around markets and COVID-19. We also had a very vibrant discussion around COVID-19 and markets. And we have a few different things that have come out of the community of practice, one of which is the FAQ document that people might be familiar with. But we've got a lot going on, and this is a little call for new members. If you're interested to get involved, you're very, very welcome. Both Carrie and I are on the advisory committee, and the advisory committee was refreshed in January 2021 with the support of USAID BHA. So we are working towards a new learning agenda and hopefully a new website. We're currently in discussion to merge the Markets and Crisis community with the EMA website, which some people might be familiar with. So lots of very exciting stuff happening, which can look at expanding the scope, the scale and the impact of the work that MIC does. And one of the things I thought it might be worth drawing your attention to in this webinar is the market-based programming framework, which if you just click onto the next slide, Abdullahi, this is something, yeah, there we go. This is something which people on the call might have seen, but is something that was created by the MIC a few years ago. And this is really relevant for the topic that we're talking about today around market assessments. The market-based programming framework, with people in crisis at the center, essentially demonstrates to us the range and the scope of different types of market-based programming that we can be doing. From using markets, both on the supply side and demand side, right the way up to supporting and making market system change, as well as taking into consideration at the top there, the reform of market policies or services and infrastructure. And all of the information that we might need to do all these different types of market-based programs come from market assessments. So if you haven't seen this, it's something that I'd recommend that you check out. You can find it on the SEEK website, but this is a good starting point for our chat today. And so that's enough from me. Carrie and I just thought we'd share a few reflections, I think, on market trends that we have been seeing over the past few years. And maybe, Carrie, I'll kick it over to you, but what are you excited about at the moment that you've been seeing in the MIC and just generally in the markets world that you thought you might want to share?
Great question. Really quickly before I answer that question, I am going to ask either Abdullah or Pauline to turn on the participant chat so that we can get some questions, not just directly to the panelists, but between each other, because one of the great things about MIC, as you well know, Corey, is the banter, the conversation that happens. And I think that's probably my first answer to you. Is that we've seen a trend towards a lot more collaboration and discussion around. I mean, I know that's what MIC is for, but what's been great is a couple of recent examples. For example, the Lebanon blast, Myanmar. We had the coup in Myanmar. We had people coming on board and kind of saying, "Hey, wait a minute, what are other folks doing? I want to hear," and that creating that sense of collaboration amongst the group. I think it's really important. The group has such a diverse membership, both in terms of people who are maybe new to this kind of work, or maybe working in a different sector. Maybe they've been working in water or shelter or something like that, and they're starting to get more interested in markets. And I think just having a space where any question is an appropriate question has been really interesting in these, as these big things, worldwide things happen, and we want to start talking about them. So that would be my the first thing that comes to mind as we start talking about new things that are happening, is that I feel like we're maybe starting to collaborate a little bit better than we used to in the past.
Yeah.
Now, what about you, Corey? What do you think? Where do you see the trends going, or do you what do you think? Is market assessment changing? I mean, today we're talking about a lot of different available tools. I'm just wondering what you're thinking.
Yeah, there are lots of tools out there, lots of acronyms. That was a great poll at the beginning, Abdullah. Yes, I totally agree. Collaboration is something I'm really passionate about and really excited to see too. One thing I was reflecting on is that we've seen quite a shift towards doing more rapid assessments. So I think those of us kind of years ago that were trying to convince people around doing market assessments, around kind of cash programming and market-based programming, the EMA was one of the big tools that came out. And it's not a surprise to me that that was at the top of the poll that the participants shared.
Absolutely.
The EMA is kind of the market assessment tool that everyone thinks of. And the EMA is great. I'm a big fan of it. And I know, Carrie, that you were one of the people that was involved in it as well.
And Lily, who we have here today.
Lily, yeah. So, we're standing on the shoulders of giants there. But the EMA is market system assessment. So it's relatively detailed. You do need to select a specific market, specific network of actors for goods or services. And what I think we are seeing quite a lot of now is more of an appetite for more rapid, kind of quick and dirty assessments, which might tend to be more kind of marketplace as opposed to market system. And I was just looking on the EMA website, and actually I think in terms of the traffic there, we have got fewer EMA kind of market system assessments being uploaded. It seems to be, a lot more kind of two-pager things that you're seeing on Relief Web or kind of coming through the various clusters, which is a good thing. It feels like more people have bought into market assessments in that sense. Yeah. And looking at some of like the recent responses in places like South Sudan, in places like Latin America with Hurricane Eta, I feel like there's been this kind of tendency for rapid assessments, which it's great if you're doing short-term interventions and sort of you have kind of strategies that are relatively small in scope. However, I feel like we're increasingly working in these protracted situations, aren't we? You know, the usual suspects, the Congos, the South Sudans. And actually in some of those situations, I feel like having market baselines, having kind of a solid understanding of critical markets is actually quite important. So I kind of feel like there has been this shift, whereas we've kind of convinced everybody that rapid market assessments are kind of a good thing to be doing. It's the low-hanging fruit. But yeah, it kind of feels a little bit like we might be missing some of the granularity that we might want from more in-depth assessments. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's always a challenge. And I think one of the biggest issues is that different agencies are looking for different things. Humanitarian folks may be looking for different things than development actors. So it's really important that you kind of align the tools to your particular need. And I mean, we've got the market-based programming graphic up in front of us. And for me, this is such a great starting point, right? It helps you think about what are we trying to do in this moment. You know, another trend that I've been seeing is DCED is coming out with some guidelines to do market systems development in fragile contexts, and that the MBP framework that we just saw on the screen a minute ago is referenced in those guidelines, which are, I think they're out at the end of this month. And so much of those guidelines talks about one of the things that we just haven't done yet, which is get humanitarian and development actors to actually work together and recognize the kind of complementarity. I know it's been one of the criticisms that we've had around the MERS was first it was too humanitarian, then it was too development-y. I think on the third version we might have got there, but I also think we as the community has kind of started to get there and just acknowledge we come at this from different directions, and that's fine, but what it means is there's a responsibility on all of us to work in that nexus to how do we as practitioners make sure that we are bringing others into the conversation, right? Into the decision-making process. You know, I would love to be seeing more of these market assessments in cluster meetings, or, you know, hey, humanitarian organization, I need to talk to you because I know you've been working in this region, and now I'm coming in with my market programming or my market systems lens, and I want to understand what's been happening, what data you already have, because we have all these tools, we know that people aren't just. It's not that people are unaware, right? It's not that they don't have any information. It's that we have complementary information. So yeah, it's not so close that I'd call it a trend, but I think there's a higher level of awareness. And I would really love to use things like the MSMA, which we're about to talk about, as the point of conversation, the shared conversation space that we can start to get at some of the nexus issues, because I think that's where we're still really not having the conversations that we ought to be having.
I agree. And on that, actually, one of the things that's really great about the this new MSMA tool is that it recognizes that rapid assessments aren't kind of where it ends, but actually does kind of link to more in-depth kind of, you know, market systems, supply chain analysis, which is going on, but often we're kind of we're saying the same thing in different languages, aren't we? So it's nice to actually have that kind of connect there. And I know you mentioned about cluster meetings, just to give a shout out, because I think one of the great trends around rapid market assessments that I've seen is Reach working with cash working groups, doing their JRAMs, their joint rapid assessments of markets, which we've kind of seen pop up in lots of different countries. But that's, I think, encouraged lots of local NGOs as well to kind of get involved in kind of market assessments in multiple contexts. So that's
and sectors. I don't know if you're seeing it, Corey, but I'm seeing new sectors getting interested in markets. I kind of mentioned it before, but what are I'm seeing maybe shelter, wash. What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, definitely. So again, like, I guess we're quite privileged, aren't we, Carrie? We sort of are involved in seeing what comes through the D group. And I think over time, there is a lot more that's kind of come through that is outside of the normal kind of FSL, food security and livelihoods kind of scope. And something which we repeatedly say in sort of the markets world is that markets are essential to lives and livelihoods of people affected by crisis. But actually, lives and livelihoods, they involve all sectors, right?
Right.
And people have needs, and we have sectors. So it's actually a really great thing to see that it's not just the food security and livelihood people that are ones that are banging on about market analysis and market assessments, but there's been this shift definitely where other sectors are now kind of saying, actually, this is super relevant for us. We want to provide goods and services to meet our sectoral objectives, and we want to know how we can use markets for that. And I think this has partly been linked to Abdullah mentioned the Misma at the beginning, these kind of sphere companion guides. But also the Sphere 2018 update, they have that great annex around delivering assistance through markets. And also they've kind of included in those different technical sectors bits around, using markets for achieving sectoral objectives. That and the kind of unavoidable rise of cash programming, which is kind of everywhere and, in every context. But there's some really great things that I've seen. They've come through the MIC in the last kind of few years. The shelter cluster have done some fantastic guidance that's around rental market assessments. The WASH cluster have come up with this fantastic market-based programming guide. And I know that Save the Children have been working with them on doing these kind of rolling out trainings around the world. Nutrition and education, both of those global clusters have come up with kind of guidance notes around the use of cash, which recognize that in order to do cash programming to meet sectoral objectives, you do actually need to have an understanding about supply and demand of nutritional foods or about educational facilities. And I feel like actually, even in protection as well, we're kind of seeing this increased awareness that actually market analysis and market assessments, they're crucial to understanding things that are linked to protection risks.
That's always such a big one, because it can feel initially like protection is something very separate from markets, and yet as you pointed out, I love that we have sectors, but people actually have needs, right? And a lot of those protection needs have roots or solutions in markets. And so again, it's us creating these barriers. Sometimes we need to find ways to engage with one another. And I really hope that MIC continues to be a place where that can happen. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a lot of buzz these days about nutrition, bringing nutrition into food systems and using some of our market systems tools around nutrition. So I can't say I know very much about it, but there's a couple events coming up soon, and I'm like, oh yes, another way to look at our systems. I'm loving it. So
definitely. And I think actually that's probably quite a nice segue, because we've kind of, there is this interest across all these different other sectors, but ultimately kind of pushing for things that are multi-sectoral, because there's so much multi-sectoral cash hanging around, is really important. And so that's why there's such great value in something like this MSMA tool, which is good enough, but also has a direct link to kind of MPCA interventions and to kind of supply chain analysis and things. So maybe, I don't know, Lily and Hannah, do you want to kind of
hear from Lily and Hannah and what they've got, since we've been talking sectors, but let's let them tell us about the multi-sector tool. Yeah,
over to you, ladies.
Hi, can you hear us okay?
Yes, we can.
I think you do perfect.
Okay.
Abdullah, would you mind getting the slides up, please?
Okay. Just 1 more seconds. Okay. Then here we go.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm Hannah from UNHCR, and I'll be talking through the multi-sector market assessment guidance with Lily from NRC. And Lily, if you want to say hi as well, I think it'll be a little bit more difficult to confuse Hannah and Lily than Corey and Carrie. So
thanks, Hannah. Hi, my name is Lily. I'm the Regional Cash and Market Advisor for NRC, based here in currently very sunny Nairobi, but the rain could come any second. Thanks, Hannah.
okay, so I'll start quickly by introducing what the MSMA is. So in fact, it's guidance and a toolkit that provides very simple step-by-step guidance on how you can take multi-sector market assessments. It's based on a market assessment framework, MAF, that Lily will speak about in more detail in a bit. And in this MAF, you have 4 different steps that you move through as you go through your MSMA process. And then we also have a final step on monitoring. And this webinar is called Market Assessment Fit for Your Needs. So in fact, this is exactly what MSMA is. It's been structured so that based on your context, on the information that you have already available, and the cash assistance that you're planning, that you can make it as simple or as complex as needed. So you can just do a rapid and fairly simple marketplace assessment where you can use a lot of secondary data, and sometimes secondary data will be sufficient, or you can go into more detailed and complex supply chain or market system analysis that Corey and Carrie were talking about before as well. So it's basically your context, the scope of the planned cash assistance, and the already existing information that will dictate how far you need to go. And this is something that's built in the MAF. So after each step, you have a proceed, skip, or stop logic. The same thing Lily will be talking about this in a bit. In the MSMA, we also have quite extensive toolbox. So we got 14 what we call ready to contextualize tools. We got tools for data collection, data analysis, and reporting. And the tools are aligned with each step of the market assessment framework. The guidance, especially initially, had a displacement focus, but you can easily use it and adapt it to a range of different contexts that where we will be working. Lily will be showing us some of the tools, especially the analytical tools, but they are very handy. And in fact, they also make market assessments accessible. So even stuff that have less skills and maybe are less experienced, but market data collection and analysis can then successfully carry out like a basic multi-sector market assessment. If you want to go to more complex markets, if you want to look at housing, for example, then you would ideally need a bit more background on market assessments. And then finally, with the whole package, there's annex, where you have more detailed process and technical guidance that's initially it was done for the team leaders, but it's useful for anybody who wants to go through the MSMA. So you get a bit more information on the key concepts and the activities that we refer to in the main guide, and you should read it along the MSMA, the main guidance. Abdullah, next slide, please. So the initial MSMA, we worked on it already in 2016, 2017. So this new revised version takes then on board user experiences and all kinds of feedback that we got from different contexts. I think you can, broadly speaking, we got 3 main, or the new things can be summarized under 3 main headings. One key thing is the new and adapted or updated market assessment framework. Abdullah already mentioned early on in the webinar when he was talking about the iterative approach, and this is very, very clearly articulated across the I will get there, MAF, the math. So this is the proceed, skip, or stop logic based on your findings and information needs. We also increased emphasis on the pre-analysis prior to assessment. Before it was kind of, yes, let's do a market assessment, everybody jump on it, let's get our tools ready and go. And now its emphasis is much more on have a look what's already there, have a look what other actors have been doing, and then design your assessment based on that. And well, along these lines, there's a much more stronger emphasis on secondary data. It was great to hear Corey and Carrie mention about the different sectors that are now more and more interested in markets and markets assessments. So in this new guidance, this is also like services are also more prominently included already in the math. And we've also increased guidance and tools for protection related issues. One of the key things, I don't know how many of you saw the old MSMA, it was relatively heavy. So now this new one, the main guidance is actually only 25 pages long. So for somebody who wants to go through quite rapidly and understand what a market assessment would take, it's an excellent overview. So you can go through the 25 pages. The design is also very easily accessible. And then based on that, you can click your way further, have a look at the tools or the annexes. And we've also added more field examples to this new version. And the third great news with this revised version are the streamlined and improved tools. So we reduced overlap and strengthened the coherence between the different tools. Lily will show you, but each step has a number of key tools attached to it. The formats remain adaptable. So in fact, all of the tools are available either in Word or in Excel. So you can very easily adapt them to your needs. They are not coded in COBOL precisely for this reason, because as people adapt them, then for example, the COBOL coding would need to be changed. We've also strengthened the analytical tools, which is something quite significant for this MSMA toolkit, because those truly help somebody who is less experienced to walk through the different analytical steps and get to the next level of conclusions, and this way taking the assessment forward. So yeah, all in all, I think the toolkit has become much more accessible with the revised math and the tools. It's more fluid, it's more accessible and easy to understand even for the less experienced practitioner. This said, it also recognizes the complexity within and across the different market systems. This is where the stepwise logic comes in. And that's why there's also the possibility to go all the way to market system analysis where needed. I guess I will stop here and hand it over to Lily so she can walk us through then the framework itself, show us some of the tools, and also show this proceed, skip, or stop logic.
Thanks, Hannah. I assume you can hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up. That's great. Abdullahi, please can you proceed to the next slide? But before I get stuck into the math, I just wanted to say a big thank you to UNHCR actually, because it's not very often that an organization that develops a tool actually goes back to it and revises it on the basis of learning and field experiences. That's quite unusual, and UNHCR have done that in this instance on the basis of the learning from people like Joe Zaremba, who's also on this call, Ricardo, who sadly can't be with us, Alexander Gouchot, who might be with us, I'm not sure, and Rosie Jackson, and a few others. Like, you guys know who you are. If you've used the tool out there, you know, it's been brilliant because your documentation of your experience with the MSMA has helped to create this new version. So that's fantastic. And again, thanks to UNHCR for actually revising a tool on the basis of learning. So the math is essentially the backbone to the MSMA. Hannah has hinted to this already. Essentially what it does is it covers the 5 steps of the MSMA. It has, for each step, as you can see on the slide in front of you, for each step, you have got a purpose with key guiding questions. And then we also have key actions, and these are the actions which the user would have to go through. And some of those actions will be tied to specific tools, and we'll come to that a little bit later. And then at the end of most of the steps, I think it's mainly step 1 and step 2, you will have to make a decision whether or not you continue to the next step or whether you skip to another step. All right, and that's what Hannah was referring to as the skip. What did you call it again, Hannah? The skip, proceed, stop, which I keep getting the order the wrong way around. The math has key analytical questions, which are the overarching questions that the assessment has to answer, and you can see those at the top there. They are essentially related to cash-based interventions, but you will see that in the last analytical framework questions, it also relates to supporting market actors. So the first question is really around, can existing service providers, that's market actors and service providers, actually provide people with the goods that they require, the goods and services they require. Then it considers the price, would it be appropriate? And then it talks about, would there be any significant negative impact? What would the risks be for the people we serve or for the market actors actually involved in the intervention? Then lastly, it asks the question, a very important one, which also speaks to the market-based framework that Corey and Carrie shared, where you've got the use the market, support the market. So, the next question relates to that kind of market support component of, do those market actors actually require any interventions to support them so that they can then proceed to provide the goods and services required by the people that we are working with, okay? So those are the overarching questions. And then, as I mentioned earlier, for each step, you have specific key questions that speak to that step, and of course, the key actions that, of course, reflect that as well. I'm now going to talk about, if Abdullahi can go to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the skip, proceed, stop, or stop, proceed, skip, whichever way around we're talking about. Abdullahi, could you go to the next slide, please? Because this is actually quite an important part of the math. The reason why it's quite important is because it's part of that guiding process that Hannah was talking about earlier, that kind of tailoring of how you can feel your way into the depth of the analysis that you want to undertake. Abdullahi, could you go to the next slide? Sorry, it's the next one along. That's it, okay. You can just, that's it, brilliant. So just stop there, Abdullahi, for a second. So at the end of the main steps, you will have these options that appear in the guidance document. On the left, you can see the options, and then next to that, you've got some scenarios as to explain further what those options could look like. Now, this is the table that follows step 1. Now, step 1 is quite an important step. Step 1 is the step where the users are encouraged to undertake as much secondary data analysis as possible. The reason why that is emphasized is because on the basis of our learning, and I think most of you will agree to this point as well, that most practitioners do not undertake a thorough secondary data analysis before launching into their field work. They don't look at what's already existing. And with the fantastic work that's being done by REACH and by the cash working groups, there's a phenomenal amount of data that's increasingly available, not only to mention the work that's also being done by development practitioners, who we must also keep in mind when we're undertaking this kind of work. Government ministries, etc., they also produce a lot of data, bureaus of statistics, and so on and so on. So step 1 really encourages you to undertake your secondary data. So this, as I said earlier, is the option table at the end of step 1. So the first option you have is to proceed with step 2. And step 2 is essentially further field work and data collection. Step 2 is divided into 3 levels. 2.1 is marketplace analysis. So you go to your marketplace where the people you work with, generally speaking, go to purchase the goods and services they require. Step 2.2 is supply chain analysis. So it's taking a much broader perspective. And then step 2.3 is the market systems analysis. Now that refers to, I'm just thinking about what Carrie was saying earlier about the EMA and how it took a market systems approach. So as you can see, what the MSMA is doing is it's tiptoeing you down this journey. You start off with your secondary data, and then you go onto marketplace, and then if you still don't get your answers, you go onto your supply chain, and then lastly, you go into your bigger picture market system to find the answers that you're looking for. So in this instance, with this first option, you're being told to go into step 2. Now, the reason why you would do that is because the secondary data analysis that you've undertaken has failed to meet your information needs. What you want to know is not available in secondary data. So it's saying, come on, go on, off you go, and collect further information, which is fantastic, okay? Can I just say also in step 1, when you're undertaking your secondary data analysis, you're also encouraged to really think about the technical specifications of the goods and services that you think your beneficiaries are going to want to purchase. And the reason why it does this at the very beginning is so that you are on the same page with your assessment team regarding what those technical specifications look like. And this is also a way to flush out, sorry, my dog's going a bit bananas. This is also to flush out any concerns technical advisors may have regarding specifications. We all know that certain sectors have certain specifications around plastic sheeting or around corrugated iron thickness, etc. This brings it all out and says, what is it we're looking for? Step 1 is also the place where you really try and quantify the likely demand you're going to place on the market as well. So what are people likely to purchase? What are they going to buy? This is where your willingness to pay analysis also comes in. Okay, the next option is to proceed with step 3, which is to analyze the risks and identify mitigation measures. Now, you would do this if you have enough information. So in this instance, in this scenario, the secondary data, your review of secondary data has answered your information needs. You know, fantastic. You don't need to go to the field to collect data. You can go straight ahead, look at risk and mitigation, and then move on to report writing and identifying indicators for monitoring, which is fantastic. The next option, thanks Abdullahi, would be to proceed with step 4, and that's to collate your data findings and to write the final report. Now, in this instance, this would be where, from your secondary data review, it is very, very clear that market-based interventions at this point in time are not feasible. Now, this could be due to security, safety, could be due to the monopoly of a particular trader who has links with a dodgy group, you know, or something like that. It could be due to any number of reasons. It could be because the commodity you wanted to monetize is perhaps not available in the market, wasn't before, and not likely to be available in the near future. So there's no way that you can rely on stimulating that particular supply chain. Now, the reason why you're encouraged to go on to report writing is because then you can document your findings, have it all there in black and white for future use, because essentially there's no reason why in the near future the market may be able to respond to cash, and a market-based intervention could be possible. And that's why the next step after your report writing would be monitoring, because you might want to monitor certain elements of the market so that you can then go back to check whether or not the market is more enabling. So that is essentially the proceed, skip or stop, and it really does help the user to weave their way through the options and to tailor the assessment accordingly. And as I said earlier, it really emphasizes the secondary data component. Next slide, please, Abdullahi. Now I'm going to give you a bit more of a visual on this, just so that, because some people are far more visual. These are the steps in the MSMA. So you've got step 1, which is secondary data. You've got step 2, as I said earlier, you've got 2.1, which is marketplace, 2.2 supply chain, 2.3 market system. Then you've got risk at number 3, writing report at 4, and monitoring markets at number 5. So following the same logic as we showed you earlier, at the end of step 1, you could, Abdullahi, please just press one button. You could just go to step 2 and then continue down that pathway of collecting more information. And again, as I said earlier, you would do that if the secondary data review did not answer your information needs. Now, something important here to keep in mind. When you begin your assessment, you might have 15 commodities in your basket that you want to analyze. Anything from basic food needs to corrugated iron to maybe aquatabs or something along those lines. You might have a variety of goods and items that the people require that you think you can monetize through local markets. You may find at the end of step 1 that you can park maybe half of those commodities because secondary data, loads of jimmies or reach assessments have actually indicated that food items which people buy on a daily basis are fine. So you could probably say, For those commodities, we're fine. We can park those there after step 1. We don't need to continue. But for other commodities, maybe more nuanced livelihood assets or maybe shelter materials, you might need to continue down into step 1, step 2.2, step 2.3. You might need to continue in that analysis until you're happy with the information you're collecting. And in this way, the MSMA is actually helping you to collect more information, deeper information, broader information about the commodities where you have the greatest concern, and enables you to park the commodities where you have answers already available, so that you focus your resources on those commodities that require deeper analysis. And this is what I love about the tool as well. So you can start off with those 15 at step 1 and end up with maybe 1 or 2 commodities as you move through from 2.1 to 2.2. I hope that was clear. Anyway, if it wasn't, you can always ask me later. So Abdullah, the next option would be, as we said earlier, would be to jump to the risk analysis. And that would be when the secondary data has met your information needs. No need to go to the field to collect more data, and therefore then you continue to the report writing and then the monitoring of markets. And the last one, Abdullah, please, would be the last scenario where, unfortunately, for whatever reason there is, a market-based intervention is not possible, and you go straight through to documenting your findings and identifying indicators for monitoring so that you can then go back at a future time to check. Okay, so that just gives you a visual representation of how the MSMA helps you to, first of all, drill down into, for a particular commodity, down to the market systems level if you need to, and also enables you to skip and hop across certain steps, with documentation highlighted as well as secondary data being the foundation to the beginning of your assessment. Okay, Abdullah, can you go on to the next slide? So at this point in time, I'm just going to go a little bit into, oh yeah, that's just the whole cycle there for you, because for some commodities, you might have to do all the steps. Or in one assessment, you might have to do all the steps, but not for every single commodity, all right? So for some, you may stop at step 1, and for others, you may continue, as I said, to 2.1 or 2.2. Thank you, Abdullah. Next one, please. So in this next slide, I was going to talk to you a little bit about the toolbox. Now, Margarita, you put a question out there in the Q&A about you couldn't open the tool. So now I had this problem too. I'm not exactly very clever when it comes to technology. You have to save the file and then reopen the PDF in Acrobat Reader. And then when you open it, you will see all the tools there on the left-hand side ready for you to download and to use. So I hope that answers your question. Hannah mentioned the 14 fantastic tools. They're ready to contextualize. They're either in Excel or in Word, so you can download them easily. Of those 14 tools, 7 are data collection, and 5 are analysis, and 2 are reporting, one of which is the monitoring tool. In this table here, it's very user-friendly. You've got the step, the tool that you would use in that step, and then you've got the purpose of the tool. Now, another reason why we did this was because more experienced practitioners might only want to use the math and the annex because they have sufficient knowledge to be able to pick up and go as they want. So this is also quite enabling. It's quite an easy summary of all the tools. The purpose also gives you a sense of what you can achieve with that tool. And you may want to mishmash, or you may want to adjust a tool that perhaps not used at one point and use it at a different point. So it gives you that flexibility to use the tools according to how you'd like to. For contextualization purposes, Annex 2 provides a lot of fantastic guidance. So the Annex provides more detailed technical guidance for team leaders. It elaborates on key concepts and activities referenced by the step-by-step guide, and provides practical tips and additional background information on carrying out the steps. So it's well worth looking at Annex 2. When Hannah spoke of the MSMA going on a diet, essentially all the stuff went into this annex. So all the juicy bits, a lot of juicy bits went into there. So if you want to know more about seasonality, or you want to know more about having a gender focus, or considering protection issues and so on, then the guidance document can help you with that. Also, there's a really good table there that I remember Rosie developing, which is around how do you know whether or not you can monetize a specific service or commodity. So there's some tools in there and some guidance, which is very, very useful, and links to other documents that you can also refer to. And there's also some guidance there also in terms of urban spaces as well. You may notice this. If you look at step 1 and step 2 there, 2.1 and 2.2, you have a set of data collection tools, and then you have a data analysis tool. Now, I love this because it's mimicking what we do in the field. Everybody knows that you collect data and then you analyze it that night or the next day. And then you collect more data and then you analyze it. And as you collect and analyze, you learn more, you make decisions, and then you decide on what your information gaps are, what needs to be collected the next day, where you need to focus your attention, right? What are the assumptions you need to make? You know, are there any other key questions that you need to identify? And the MSMA is doing this as well, because you can see there, look at step 2.1, you've got the data collection and data analysis. So each time you're encouraged to review the data you collect, analyze it, and make a decision. And this is really important because this is also part of the tailoring of knowing which direction you want to go in, how much more detail you require, and what depth of analysis you will need to take. So just to demonstrate that a wee bit, next slide, please, Abdoulaye. This is an example of analysis tool 3, which comes at the end of step 2.2. And step 2.2 is your supply chain analysis. So this is where you've done your secondary data, you've got more information that you need, you've gone to your marketplace, still some issues there, my questions aren't answered, right, okay, I'm going to start looking at the supply chain in more detail because I want to understand the movement of this commodity, you know, from producer to consumer, what's going on. So you've done that, and now you're sitting down to look at it, okay? And this analysis tool is bringing in all that data, you're bringing it all together, okay? The tool is stepwise. You'll see there, this is just a snapshot of the first page. It goes step by step, and it asks prompting questions. What do we know about the number of actors? What do we know about the prices? What can you tell us? And you can see there that the presentation of findings is laid out very simply, and we've put some examples in there too. You'll also see there that we talk about the program intervention period. So you're getting a sense of timescale. So you've got time frame of 12 months ago, so this time last year, of now, and then also looking at your program intervention period. Now, this is quite important because in many cases, the data you collect today may not be relevant in 6 months' time, especially if you're looking at a very seasonal commodity, all right? Or maybe where there could be external factors that could affect the availability or the price of that product looking into the future. And also, sorry, that was little PK. Also, because we tend to analyze today and implement in 3 months' time. So we want to make sure that our numbers, the data we're collecting, is still relatively valid and applicable to our implementation, the implementation of our project. So that's in there too. The reason why we included some analysis tools is because, generally speaking, practice has shown us that many teams struggle with undertaking analysis, and that any support we can give to teams to undertake that analysis is largely welcome. So this kind of hand-holding process that the tools provide enables that. We understand that most people learn in the job, in action, as they do things. So if this helps them to do that, it's fantastic. The analysis tools also help us to funnel the information to that decision point where you have, again, the decisions to make. Do you go on? Do you stop? What do you do next? Again, there's kind of options that we showed you earlier about the skip, proceed, or stop. So that's why the analysis tools are quite useful. At the end of each analysis tool worksheet, you will see a summary where you're asked to summarize your findings. And that pushes us to actually make decisions in the field. What are we finding out? What do we need to know? Is it good enough? Or should we go back and collect more? You can see a few questions there related to market competitiveness. The next question relates to market integration. The next one around expandability of volume. The next around prices and likely changes to prices. And the third one, the next question, the fifth question in this worksheet actually relates to market support interventions. It asks, do those traders, do those actors require support to enable a response? And that, Hannah, is all from me. Thank you. Back to you, Abdoulaye.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for all the presentation discussion from the overall market assessment to this multi-sectoral market assessment tools. And now it's time for question answer. If you have in general for all the presentation, let me look at if there is still some question that is not yet responded. Yeah, that is just okay. So okay, I have. So I don't see if there is. I don't know if there is still some question that are not responded yet.
There's a cool question from Chris in the Q&A. He says, Chris, I don't know whether you can use your own voice. I don't think you can you? Can he talk? But his question is,
You're doing a great job.
Yeah, I saw it.
And then he says, very much appreciate MSMA's focus on identifying existing sector data, challenges that regardless of what exists, cash actors are often required to produce their own, sometimes duplicative or very small scale market assessment proposal stage. Any best practices for how actors can most effectively structure these small scale market assessments to work best with existing data from the cash working group, etc. I think that's a really good question because that's a challenge that we often face. Any smart answers from the panel? Corey, how about you?
I was just trying to find the question in the chat. Sorry, I'm kind of looking through.
It's in the Q&A, sorry.
Oh, in the Q&A. Oh, because I'm an idiot. Yes, okay. Regardless of what exists, cash action often. Yes, I'd agree. I kind of feel like this isn't all on donors. It's an easy thing to say, isn't it? Oh, donors need to change their criteria. But I do think to a certain extent, if donors are asking cash actors to produce their own small scale market assessments, there does need to be some kind of recognition that there are things going on maybe at the cluster level, or there are things that are secondary data, that the step that Lily talked about, the first step of kind of scope what's out there. And if there is some secondary data that is relevant, that is reliable, be willing to kind of use that and refer to it. So I do feel like there needs to be slightly more flexibility, and some donors are much better at that, I feel, than others. And then I feel, and I mean, it's funny because I know, Chris, you work for Reach and you're kind of asking for best practices to effectively structure them. I feel like, you've used the RAM methodology, which I think is quite a good one. And that's something that is widely available. So there are some, market assessment tools that are quite simple. And now we have this MSMA one. So if kind of cash working groups are, promoting a certain tool, that's also kind of a good way forward. Yeah, I don't know, that's kind of the thoughts off the top of my head, but I definitely agree. I've seen this in the field as well.
Maybe just one additional thought there. I think a lot of donors are nowadays pushing for more and more cash collaboration. So I would see like more openness. Of course, you have to make a compelling case that the data you use is good, etc. But this like increasing focus on not repeating or not redoing assessments that or collecting data that we already have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was kind of, we touched upon that a little bit in the points that Carrie and I were making, but I'm always really encouraged when I see agencies being willing to share their data. I think, yeah, I totally agree. I think kind of, that aids the general humanitarian response and makes us quicker and more streamlined. So yeah, absolutely collaborate and share as well.
And I'm gonna build on that because there's a couple of different questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A about how often market assessments need to be repeated. And I think it's really, and I want you all to jump in and agree, disagree, whatever, but I think it really depends on what you're looking at in the markets. If it's immediate post, like the shock was yesterday, markets are going to be adjusting in a very different way than, the shock it was 6 months ago, and markets are starting to settle down, but they're by no means recovered. I think, I kind of want to say it's a judgment call, but that's not fair to all of our participants out there. So what do you guys say? If it's not a judgment call, or how do you make your judgments?
Can I jump in there, Carrie? Because I think you're right. All assessments are snapshots in time, right? And this is where tools like the market, CRS, Corey, is really, really important, is because as with any assessment, be it protection or livelihoods or food security, or nutrition, it's a question of trying to keep that data alive. So on the analysis, you could do your risk analysis and say, well, looking at the volatility of the context and the fragility of that particular commodity or supply chain, do we need to give particular attention to this? And then you can set up a monitoring system to back it up. And what I like about the market is that you have those thresholds. So if your price of ginger nut biscuits that I've just been eating here, if it exceeds a certain amount, that will trigger a response that could be to reassess that particular supply chain, which I think is really useful. So I think monitoring really plays a key role here. And that's why, Chris, I'm going to blow the horn of REACH. This is why I love the work that REACH does, is because it collects that data on a regular basis, and it gives us warning signals as to what it is. I mean, I think something else which the analysis tools of the MSMA does is it forces you to understand the implications of the data you're collecting. Now,
just what I was going to say, Lily, we have to remember that price changes are just like a fever in someone's body. They tell you something's wrong, but they don't tell you what's wrong.
Yeah, and that's why in the MSMA we collect, analyze, because you want to be able to understand what are the numbers saying, what are they telling us, what are we missing, what do we need to know, where should we go next, what do we need to triangulate. So I think that's also really important when it comes to trying to keep that data alive, is understand what it means, and then most importantly is to understand what it means to the household or whoever your target group is, because it will have an implication. Can you still afford to buy ginger nuts, Carrie, or should you switch to hobnobs, or perhaps to just eating a banana?
Every time, Lily. Hobnobs every time.
So that is also why it's important to understand the implications, and that's why I think I'm sure REACH does this too. But then you have these alternative commodities, the cheaper ones that people will prefer to buy if they can't afford the ones which anyway.
Yeah, there's also a question about when markets are self-healing, or when the private sector reacts faster than aid agencies or development agencies. And I think it's a good point. I think even as we're doing these market assessments, you really have to understand, this is underlining what you just said, Lily. It's about what's the link between what I'm trying to learn. What am I trying to learn? If Emily Sloan was here, she would tell us, well, what do you want to know? Make sure you know that first. And then what's the link? Why are you looking for that thing in comparison to the households? What do they need? Because sometimes, absolutely, what we hope to learn is that the private sector can solve the problem themselves and they don't need us. And I think it's hard to not be needed, but we have to remember that's part of what we're looking for with market assessments as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think this is where, Carrie, you're a big proponent of this, if that's the right word, is the inclusive market analysis also, because, I mean, NRC, we work with refugees, displaced people. They're the power and agency of some marginalized groups within those markets, may not always be a positive one. I think what we need to look for is positive relationships between consumers and service providers, and try and find, try and make sure there's equality in that. I remember doing an assessment in Kampala. This was also with REACH, actually. This is a while ago, and talking to the different refugee nationalities, they all had different relationships with market traders. If you were an Eritrean or an Ethiopian, the price was this. If you were a Somali, the price was that. And it varied according to your nationality, and that's unfortunate. So although the private sector is responding, it comes with its own norms and regulations and lack of, you know, lack of as well, the cultural issues that we also need to be very mindful of. And then the gender issues. Sorry, Corey.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, it's a shame we don't have the market-based framework up on the thing, but people in crisis are at the center. And one of the things, I know it's kind of mentioned in the Misma, but market access, that's why it's really important when you're doing a market assessment to not just see market access as being physical and financial, but that social access piece is really important. And that's exactly what you're kind of describing there. You know, are men and women getting the same prices? Are people from different ethnic groups getting the same prices? And the same quality of goods in the markets as well, you know. And that often gets lost. And I think that aspect is something which I like is included in this, but also in some other market assessment tools as well.
Oh yeah, there's some fascinating stuff being written about the social norms around Syrian refugees in Turkey and how it prevents them having bank accounts. And I know that's a different version of market-based programming, but really, really fascinating stuff, the norms. And it really opened my eyes, I think, to it's not just having the businesses do their job well, it's not just knowing your refugee populations well. There are deep cultural things that we also need to understand. And I'm not sure the tools that we are talking about today get at some of those things, but certainly that's the case for collaboration among organizations, isn't it? Is really understanding what it is that we're not seeing just because of where we sit.
Yeah, and there's a question about racketeering, which I thought was fascinating, because I know that we have this problem a lot in this region. I don't know if anybody's got advice. Who was it? Crane Rogers. Do market assessment toolkits include specific guidance, specific analysis tools pertaining to protection issues such as the risk of racketeering? Could you give an example? I mean,
I think they would uncover it, but they don't tell you how to solve it. And I think that's the thing with most of the tools. They tell you how, they help you find the problem, but the solutions are often so contextual. I don't know, Corey, what is your take on it?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And actually, I mean, there was a market assessment that I was involved in a few years ago, which is on the Emma website, and you can have a look at, which was in the Lake Chad Basin. And it was a protection risk analysis and market assessment combined, looking at income markets. So what were the risks associated for households to engage in certain income markets? And I think that was a very interesting example. I don't know if other agencies have done similar things, but there's definitely capacity to add a layer of kind of protection risk analysis to your surveys. You know, when you talk to traders, ask them, and we've been doing this in CRS with COVID-19, you know, are you scared of going to markets right now? Do you feel safe in doing your business? Have you got all of the, you know, the social distancing things and hand gel and everything in place? So there's definite scope to add that layer. I've not seen it done a lot, but I think if you're interested in that, I'd encourage you to consider it and share it via the Markets and Crisis D group, because there's always room for iteration.
That's great. And then Chiambi, who is my colleague in Yemen, is asking a bit of a stinger. There we are. He's saying, how do we manage multiple commodities with each of them could have within, how do we manage multiple commodities when each of them could have a distinct market system, and how do you streamline that using the MSMA? I think that's one for Hannah, don't you? Or does anybody else want to answer that?
I can start, but I think you covered it fairly well, Lily, already in the presentation. So you would have the same stepwise logic for your different commodities. You could see in case you can bundle some of the commodities together, and then moving from there. Maybe like I think you mentioned food in your speech. Maybe you have enough information for food, but you don't have enough information for construction materials, and maybe within the construction materials you can find, door frames and corrugated iron sheet somehow follow the same supply chain. So you could pull these, for example, together into one analysis. But Lily, you can, or anybody else do.
Carrie, did you want to add?
I think this is back to my point of why are you gathering the information, and what is that market a proxy for, an example of? So anytime, it almost doesn't matter which market you pick or which tool you're using, there are other things you're not going to cover in that market system. If you're picking maize because it's one of the most important food stuff in your area, probably they eat sorghum or millet or beans or something else that would also be a potential market. And you're never going to be able to cover absolutely every market that touches a household. So you pick from the very beginning, you pick the one that is a good example. So maybe maize is a good example because it costs the highest percentage of the food basket, and therefore when the price goes up, that other commodities are probably going to replace it. I think the thing is you have to know your population a little bit and know why you're picking the market that you're picking. And that's really kind of step 2 of the Emma, at least, and I know other tools use it as well, where you say, why am I picking what I'm picking? And you think it through. What is it representing? Back to the fever analogy. What is it representing, and why do you need to know?
Yeah. I was just about to say that the Emma is, I think, the best kind of thing out there at the moment for selecting your commodities. So I think if you are listening to this and are wanting to kind of, select commodities within certain market systems, the Emma handbook, has got a really good, simple kind of, it's like what's the phrase? Not a table. It's like a ranking exercise you can do.
Oh, yeah.
And often, like local staff, they'll kind of have a lot of that information in their heads anyway. So it's quite simple and straightforward. But yeah, that's a good one to recommend.
And just
I'm
lastly,
reassured to know that Emily Sloan is here to speak, sort of speak for herself, and she knows I'm channeling her today.
I can see, and also the really good IRC tool, which starts off with the questions you want to answer, which I think is really useful as well. Emily, if you could put that in the chat, that'd be very useful. But just to say that Jambi, when we were piloting the MSMA, and maybe Joe had a similar experience when she was doing it in Ethiopia, you could actually also have a specific team following that commodity all the way down 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 to collect that information, and have another part of the team doing other commodities which didn't require as deep an analysis. So you could also focus your team according to your information needs, right? Just being practical about it. There's a really good question about a dynamic population. I've lost it again, it's in the chat. Here we go. It's Nemaya saying, if in a station where people are on continuous move from one location to another due to conflict, what's the best market assessment approach to be used to ensure the right support reaches the beneficiaries in time? That's a brilliant question. It's also linked to hard to reach areas. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm thinking back, I think it was World Vision actually during the Venezuelan migrant crisis a few years ago. They kind of had this approach where they did very rapid assessments for multiple kind of cities along the route that Venezuelan migrants were taking through Colombia, because it was a place where a lot of people were doing cash, but linked to the financial, physical and social access question. Even though markets were there was a lot of stigma, and there was a lot of xenophobia against Venezuelan migrants. And so they did some quite good, I think they're on the CALP website actually, some quite good rapid assessments for that population on the move. I feel like there's probably people on the call who can maybe write in the chat, but it would have been quite similar on the Greece response as well, where we had people coming across mostly from Syria, but also Iraq and Afghanistan, and kind of there was a big amount of cash given there. And again, it was kind of rapid sort of market assessments in different places. But again, I think the key is probably having some sort of basic market monitoring system in place, deciding what your key indicators are. It might be, if it's a refugee context, that one of your indicators is going to be around, market access for refugees. If we're doing spot checks in our market monitoring, can people access markets still? Are there any safety and security concerns? But yeah, that's kind of I don't know what comes to mind from my side.
Can I be provocative?
And I would.
Ooh, sorry, Hannah. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. I'll go first and then I'll let you be provocative. No, but I think that's exactly it. We often still know more or less how people move and where they tend to shop. And this is where the collaboration element also comes in. People are in different places where different information from different markets, etc. So the better the coordination somewhere is in the area, I think we can have a fairly good understanding of the market around those areas.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Hannah. We're rarely surprised, right? I say this all the time, like, we know which countries are most likely to have a volcano explosion, which are most likely to have a coup. You know, we know what's likely to happen. We just don't know like the timing or severity or whatever. So there's a lot of this market stuff that we can gather in advance. Or let's face it, there's a lot of protracted crises out there. It's not in advance per se, but it's in advance of the moment that we would use it, and we can use what we know as a predictor.
And also, if I can add, Carrie's historical data.
Yeah.
So if there has been multiple years of, or if you're working in a context where there has been multiple years of conflict, and you know that the population in that area have managed somehow to meet their basic needs, then you know there's some resilience within the market system. And you can just talk to some private sector actors to get to keep a handle on that. So I think this is where historical data is really important, and that's that ability of markets to expand and contract as, you know, as people move, as demand changes. Another thing I was going to say was we must never forget the whole issue of market impact. I mean, if you're thinking about supporting a small population of people, let's say a couple of hundred, 500, 600, and they're currently in an urban or peri-urban context, then you know that the reality is that the carrying capacity of that market is likely to be able to stretch that far to include those people that you want to support. Sure. However, if you were talking about supporting over 50% or 40% of the existing population or a new population coming in, then there's going to be a higher risk of the market not being able to expand. You know, the elasticity then will be questioned. So I think sometimes we can just sometimes just make some good enough guesstimations on the basis of historical data or the market impact, that, you know, the number of people you want to help versus the total carrying capacity of the market. And that's why in the marketplace tool, I can't remember the number of the tool, it actually asks you about the market's watershed. Roughly speaking, how many people are serviced by this particular marketplace, so that you get a sense of the volume of customers who are serviced. And if you are going to be targeting a certain percentage, then you get a sense of the carrying capacity and how much you're going to be pushing it. Carrie, I'm sure I'm not using the right words. Carrying capacity.
Yeah,
okay?
works for me.
You know, okay. So that was what I think we're being told to wrap up. So.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think
but
this
just
time.
Very quickly before wrapping up, I see there's a question about French translations of the tools. So they are on the way. It may take a while before they are being edited, etc. But they are on the way.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We are at the end of this webinar. So I would like to thank you, all the participants, for your active participation, and also our great panelists. And I would like to thank our communication teams from SIP Network and CALP communication teams, and then to say bye, and yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Abdullah. Thanks, everyone who came. We loved your questions.
Thanks a lot. And
thank you, everyone.
Keep coming.
Yeah, keep them coming on Mick. We'd love to hear from you on Mick.
Yeah, join the D group.
Hannah, is there any way we can store the tools on a website? Because I think there were some issues of people trying to store it in Adobe Reader and accessing again. Is that possible?
Let me have a look. This is the solution because we want to have them embedded in the toolkit, and this is the best we could do.
Yeah, but thank you. Thanks a lot, Abdullah, for all your.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Thank you.
to Corey and Carrie, Chat Show, Joe Zaramba, Pauline, and Hannah. May the ginger nuts be with you.
Ciao, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye. Thank you.